am so excited for this new talk with my friend, Sue Johnston. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's so great to put a face with your name because we've been communicating for a little while and you are
We
just
have.
a woman. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I know we got to exchange our books. I have yours right here in front of me.
I have yours as well. Yes.
It's called Detours, Unexpected Journeys of Hope Conceived from Infertility. And when I read your story, wow, like getting to learn about you, and you shared a quote that stood out to me. Infertility was the most difficult thing that I faced in my life. Instead of consuming me, I use it for the greater good.
Yes, I do.
This is
Yes.
what you and I both share in common. We've kind of turned that pain, that chapter of our life, into a new purpose, into serving those who are struggling on this path. And I even love how you signed the book, Infertility and Friendship. And like we are friends, even though we've never met in person, but it's like you have this special connection with a fellow fertility sister who really gets it.
Right. Thank you so much. I can share a little bit more about that if you'd like. I just,
Yes.
but
Your journey is remarkable. I'm I've never when I learned about you and like when you kind of are one of the OGs in the IVF world, if you will.
and that means old grandmothers.
No, original gangster. No, you are seriously. I mean that in like the most sincere way. You are one of the ones who pioneered through this because you were
Yeah.
the infancy of IVF when it was in the early stages of it going through this.
It really was in the early stages. I think about it. I mean, Louise Brown was born in 1978, and I started trying to conceive, oh, you know, like 10 years later than that, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
86. It was like 8 years later. Yeah. So I really was in the infancy, but, and I feel like infertility just sucks the life out of you
yeah.
physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually,
Yes.
socially, you name it. It
Yeah.
does. And it just, is so difficult. And I was in that, that world for a decade of my life, trying to build a family, trying to have a child.
Yeah.
I just felt, depleted, like I was wearing a heavy raincoat that was filled with all kinds of pockets that had all kinds of heavy weights in it, and I couldn't take it off,
Mhm.
you know? And
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like I wanted, after I had a resolution, my resolution, we ended up with one son and over 40 embryos.
I mean, that is right there.
Right.
40 embryos you have transferred into you.
Right, exactly. And obviously, we'll put a pin in that. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a time when they used multiple embryos at a time and not just one. But I mean, once I had him, I decided that, Resolve was my lifeline. And if it weren't
Yeah.
for my Resolve sisters, I don't know what would have happened to me because my husband, the former naval officer, and he
Yeah.
was gone all the time. His ships would deploy. If he served for 26 years, and if you take all the years that he was at sea and gone, it was over 11 years of his life.
Wow.
And it's hard enough to deal with infertility, but when you deal with it on your own, it even sucks more life out of you too, right? Using frozen sperm and frozen embryos and that kind of thing. It was just hard. So if it weren't for Resolve, I don't know what I would have done. They took me to appointments and they took me to doctors, transfers and everything. They just were there for me, helped me with shots, all of that. So I
Yeah.
wanted to change my relationship with
Mm.
fertility because it made no sense to me.
Hmm.
Just made me feel like, what is all this for? I'm a good person and I would be a great mom and I would, I could I couldn't understand why this was happening. And I turned my life around and saying, okay, there's parts of your life that you will never understand the why. but what
Mm,
are you going to do about it?
mm,
And that made me feel like that was a better question to ask myself. What am I going to do with this? What am I going to do to make this make sense to me?
mhm.
That's why I joined Resolve and got really into
Yeah.
helping other people and writing my book and doing what I can.
Yeah. I mean, we will talk about the hats that you wear with Resolve. Like,
Right.
you're probably one of the most involved advocates I've ever met, I've ever learned about. I mean, just learning about your long history, and we'll get into that. But just to take a step back into when you were beginning to try to, you wanted to become a mom. And I remember in your book, you said 2 years into trying to conceive, little did I know that my infertility torment was only beginning. Like it was, we think things are going to move forward in the timeline that we envision. And that's one of my rule number ones is like, we got to let the timeline go. And what were some of like, just if you can highlight the beginning of when you were trying and what testing and what they kind of told you diagnosis wise?
Right,
Um,
right, right. Well, I was married in 1986, so people kind of understand the time frame. And
yeah.
I remember, walking down the aisle, I was like ready. I never went on birth control. Never, ever, ever went on birth control.
Mm,
I thought if I got pregnant right away, I would be, happy. But, at that time they said that the advice was, wait a year and see if you get pregnant on your own. I couldn't even wait that long because my husband was going away a lot,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I waited about 6 months and then we started all the testing. And I did that just, generally, with an OBGYN. And they had some unusual tests that you could read about in my book that, you know,
Yeah.
but
The post coital test is one, and they
the
still do that.
paracoidal, do they do that?
Yes. Yes. I've
Paracoidal?
heard people do that. Yes. It's
Do
still
you
around.
Did you read the one about the hamster egg?
Yes. Oh my, can you just share that? Cause I was like, oh my, the way you, I have your book right here, the way you write
Yeah.
about it.
Did you
Here, I
write
have
it?
it.
Pull it up.
Um, that your husband Bob had to have, you said, the absurd hamster egg penetration test, HEPT. You learned that a woman's egg has almost the same properties as a hamster's, and you wanted to see if Bob's sperm could penetrate a hamster egg.
I know. That's
Oh,
what, and, and then and
yeah.
it did. It worked. But go ahead, read on. What
Oh
does
yeah.
it say?
So he had to um supply, right? Provide some sperm. And then it said you were fought to keep your sense of humor, picturing a furry hamster wearing a naval officer's uniform. His missiles were not the problem.
I know his missiles were
Oh,
not the problem.
that was
Yeah.
so cute. Oh my gosh.
We can have
So
some laughter about some of
yeah,
the
you gotta laugh about it. I'm like, so
yes, yes. So after I had all these tests and we found, and my husband had the test for semen analysis and
yeah.
all of we were told that we just, couldn't find any problems. We had picture perfect cycles, picture perfect
Okay.
everything. And my OBGYN said, I've kind of, depleted everything that I know to do. I think you should go see a reproductive endocrinologist. So I
Okay.
did. Uh,
Mhm.
Probably after about 6, 8 months and getting through all the tests, and I started to see a reproductive endocrinologist, and I had laparoscopy. And long story short, we were getting ready to start an IVF, an IUI actually.
IUI, yeah.
IUI.
Mhm.
I started off with IUI, and I think I did several. This is like gotta refresh my memory, but I think I did several IUIs in the United States before we got orders to the Philippines.
Oh my gosh, that story reading two
Right.
years in the Philippines and what you went through there blew my mind.
Yes, 2 years in the United States, we tried, and then 2.5 years in the Philippines, we tried, and then we came home, and I had to have a surgery on my hip, and yeah,
Yeah.
so trying to get pregnant in the Philippines was just bizarre. Um,
Tell us like a little bit about that experience.
Oh my goodness. Well, we were living in the Philippines and there was a communist insurgency there that was killing Americans off base.
Ugh,
And in order to get any workups done, I had to drive or fly to another naval base. I don't want to, get
Yeah.
everybody concerned, hung up
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't
Yeah.
have a reproductive endocrinologist in Subic Bayfield. It was at Air Force Base. So I had to fly or drive, and we would have these United States Navy uh, vans that, you plastered on the side, and you're like not wanting to look like a target, and you have
Mm,
written on the side of your van. And it was just really scary. You would go through checkpoints, and people had machine guns that they were like loaded and on their lap and pointed at you, and you couldn't tell if they're good guys or bad guys. So it was scary. And then I was, like when things got worse, if there was an incident, which there were, um, then I would fly. I would have to fly. And
I
I would
mean,
fly on the Alpha flight in the morning and the Bravo flight in the evening. And Alpha meant the first flight. And sometimes they were uh, cargo planes that had no windows, that you sat in jump seats and you were strapped into these little canvas, seats. And
yeah.
yeah,
Now,
with
well, this was for testing for
this
what
was
kind of
what they were trying to do. They did another laparoscopy. Every
uh-huh.
time I move, and my husband and I moved a lot, the doctors would want to do their own laparoscopy to see for
Hmm.
themselves. And
Hmm.
then this particular doctor was in, the theory was to start an artificially induced menopause state.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so he wanted to shut down my menstrual cycles, and I had to go there for blood tests and that kind of thing. Um, and, they would take my blood and they'd have to fly it back to the United States. And if they had to get it read back there, well, then they'd lose it. And it took like a month to find out what the blood tests were saying. And
Oh my gosh. You
I
experienced a whole nother level of fertility stress that I don't think I've never met anyone else that has gone through what you've gone through.
mean,
You're in the
it's,
Philippines, what, mid 30s, late
I,
30s,
our early 30s. I
early
was early 30s,
30s.
like 30 years old, 30, 31, and 32.
Yeah.
I was in,
Okay. I
yeah.
mean, to experience going by helicopter and plane and dealing with fertility challenges is like, wow.
Right. And dealing with communist insurgency
Yeah.
challenges. I would have to get like a blood draw, but I had to take a complete day off from work because you would fly in the morning, like at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you'd come back 7 o'clock in the evening,
Oh my gosh.
and you're there all day just to get your blood drawn and then have them test it. After, the blood draws were not working for me, the doctor said, well, I think you should just take X amount of Clomid pills, and
Mm,
we'll start with that because we can't measure your blood. Let's just do this. And
mm.
and then we did IUIs, and I would have to go there for that. And I did a number of IUIs
Yeah.
in the Philippines.
And just reading this, that induced menopause, the results of that medication caused that knee and hip pain, which resulted in your need for the surgery, right?
Well, I
Um,
actually thought that the knee and hip pain actually, I don't know if you know anything about hip problems, but if you have pain in your groin area, that is where your hip is, the joint
mhm,
is. And I
mhm,
kept having this pain in my groin. And I was young enough to think, to not know about a hip disease, but
mm,
I thought it was endometriosis or something female related because it was close to menstrual cramp area where you
mm.
would have pain.
Okay.
Um, it wasn't caused by the medication, but it was exacerbated by the medication.
Mhm. Okay.
Therapy um, put you in an induced menopause state, and you could have stiffening of the joints, deepening of your voice, you could have hot flashes, you could have, sweats, all that kind of stuff, mood swings,
Mhm,
that I kept thinking this was probably related to infertility. I had no
mm,
clue that it
mm,
was related to a hip problem. So I was at a Navy ball, and it was Christmas ball, and we had one car. My husband drove me. The base was like 7 miles long, and we drove across the base to go to the military ball, all dressed up. And when the party was over, we were coming back in the car, and I couldn't get out to go back into my house. My leg wouldn't bend. It locked up in the car, and my husband said, I know you're supposed to, they said something about stiffening of the joint, but this is ridiculous. You
Wow.
need to go see a doctor.
Yeah.
And the name of the hospital, did you get that one?
Yes. Jungle. Jungle
Jungle General.
General. Jungle
Jungle
General. I
General
mean, the
Hospital.
way
I
you
mean,
write about this, like feeling like you were allergic to the Philippines, this joke about, I'm like, wow, like trying to learn how to walk. You're going through fertility challenges. You're in another country.
you
Yeah.
know, right?
I mean, it's incredible.
I'm serious. It's so true. It was the Twilight Zone. It really, really was.
And I'm not trying to laugh. I just think this is like, it's comical in a way where it's like, you survive. Talk about detours, the name of your book. It's like one detour after another detour, which you're the queen of the detours, I think,
I'm
going through
telling
this
you,
path.
worldwide detours, right? Not just little, local turn, you turn arounds or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds crazy. So I went to the doctor. The first thing I saw were the warning signs of dengue fever and malaria on the door when I walked
Oh my.
into the clinic of Jungle General. I saw all these, like, it had a 10-foot, 20-foot tall, like, mural on the outside of the hospital of monkeys and pythons and gorilla, like boa,
Yeah.
all these crazy,
Yeah.
like, serpents and leopards. I don't know, all this crazy animal stuff indigenous to the
Yeah.
Philippines.
Yeah.
And Jungle General was painted out of bamboo letters. And when I walked into the door,
Oh,
I saw this. It reminded me out of something that you would see in National Geographic. I learned that day that she was a Negrito, a that is the indigenous people that live in the Philippines.
mm-hmm.
Aborigines live in Australia. So if you've never heard of the word Negrito, they are people that lived in the jungle, and they could get free medical care at the Naval Hospital because they were used to help keep communists out of or intruders off the base too.
Okay. Okay.
Their male population had an interesting way to do that. I don't know if I should share that or not, but we don't have.
Sure.
Do you
Sure.
want to hear that? Okay, just so you know, this is like really, really, really odd, but they had, they had these like I mean, big knives and whatnot. They would cut the, cane to make their thatched roofs and stuff like that, and rice, they'd cook out of the bamboo and whatnot. They would use those knives to decapitate intruders and put their heads on poles at the perimeter's edge of the Navy base.
Oh my goodness.
And that is what they did to. It's like I'm telling you something out of Tarzan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really-
Okay. So fast forward to moving to IVF, right? It was shortly after that when,
So when I got home to the United States, I had to have a hip surgery first.
uh-huh.
I was diagnosed that day that I walked in and met the Negrito for the first time. I was
Yes.
diagnosed with a rare hip disease called synovial osteochondromatosis, and I have been battling hip problems since then.
Oh, I was gonna ask you about that. Oh,
Yeah,
still.
I was 33 when I had surgery.
Mm.
I had that as soon as I got back to the United States. I got back in on March 18th of 20 oh no of 1991.
Mm.
Had surgery May, like 2 months later, and then I was healing from that, and I started IVF in September,
In
and I
San
was
Diego, right?
in San Diego.
So you had
Yes,
gone through multiple IUIs unsuccessfully.
10 of them, I think, all told
And
together.
then you said something here, like you were ready to fight. How did you say it? Attack the enemy. Infertility when it's time to start IVF. You were in a wheelchair and only 6 weeks post hip surgery.
Okay, I had, like, a consultation to try
Mm-hmm.
to get going on infertility, and I wanted to do IVFs, and yeah, so it took me a
Yeah.
while to get into a program and get my first IVF started, but I remember being on crutches, out of the wheelchair and on crutches when I hobbled up to get my egg retrieval.
You said this was a 91.
Yes,
And then that's when Resolve, I mean, I love that you said that that's where you really met some of your best friends, greatest supporters, your lifeline with
right.
Resolve.
I joined Resolve before I started the IVFs.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on the crutches, just
That's what
get
I think's amazing. Like you knew you needed the support. You didn't want to go about it alone. Like you
right,
had that awareness, which I think is great. Like you recognized, I want to have some support around me.
right. I really needed it. My husband was traveling a lot. He was a very busy, he's a pretty high-ranking officer by that time. He was a commander in the United States Navy, and
Mm-hmm.
he was gone a lot. Very
Mm.
busy man.
I
Uh,
mean, just reading your story, like over 40, so 40 embryos, and you said you transferred them in batches. And I think was it 5 transfers you experienced
seven
total?
together, seven altogether.
7 altogether. Okay. So like first 6, then 8, then 6, then 5. I know you and I
Right,
talked and it's like,
right,
that's
right,
incredible.
right.
40.
And
And were they all tested? Were they all genetically tested?
not have genetic testing back then. That
Okay. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Like what is the difference between IVF then and IVF now? My
Yeah.
son is 30 years old, so this was like 3 decades, three and a half
Yeah.
decades ago.
Yeah.
Um, I think that, and I lead support groups. I lead pregnancy and parenting after infertility, and I lead general infertility as well. And I honestly, hearing what people are going through, I think the big difference is that you can take, some cells and test them to see if they're normal or abnormal embryos.
Mm-hmm.
They typically only put one back at a time. There are
Yep.
some people that I know that have put two back, especially if they're getting older. Um, and they have the receptiva, like the ERA, to see
Mm-hmm.
if you're receptive, if your uterus is receptive. They
Yeah.
could not do that back when I was going forward with IVF. They could not um, harvest eggs. They could only create embryos and freeze embryos, but freezing eggs was not, that was not around.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that the main problem still exists, though. Doctors can't figure out what makes the embryo implant.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that I had picture perfect cycles. I had thick lining. I had, blastocyst embryos. They could tell if they were blast or not. They did retrievals, and the transfers were like day 3. They didn't wait till
Mm.
day 5,
Okay.
day 3, and they would put multiple embryos back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you meaning the general you had to decide if you would be willing to take multiples, and that's high risk, or if you would selectively reduce, and
Mm.
that can be a very emotional, difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we always thought if we had multiples, we were in agreement to reduce to twins. Uh,
Mm.
but
Okay.
that is such a personal decision.
Very.
There's no right or wrong answer for that. And I think that mentioned earlier that I was one of the ones that went through infertility in its infancy. I still think that infertility is in its infancy. I
Mm-hmm.
still believe that. I think that one day we'll be able to figure out what makes an embryo implant, and we
Yeah.
just aren't there. And, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it's a good thing that some people can, choose to test their embryos to see if they're okay, but I know it's controversial as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some people with mosaic embryos, they find out that they have some abnormalities. When they have chosen to transfer a mosaic embryo, the body has a way of replacing bad cells with good, and the baby came out
Yeah.
fine. Whereas that could that embryo could be discarded or thought
Yeah.
that it was never going to
Yeah.
amount to a healthy baby. And so
Yeah. Yeah,
people,
we're learning so much. I just featured an interview with my friend Allie, who's a fertility lawyer, and we talk a lot about that in genetic testing and the PGTA lawsuit that she helped file. It's like incredible the stuff's coming out.
so true. It is so,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, I almost feel like infertility treatments have taken us, 50 years back in time
Mm,
because of the overturn of Roe versus Wade
mm, mm. Oh
and
yeah.
everything else that's going on politically in our country.
Um,
It's just really, I think it's more difficult now. It's
yeah.
more expensive now. I mean, it was still very expensive when I was going through it. It was ten to $15,000 when I was going through it.
Was
And
yours covered? Was yours covered?
no,
You had
no,
no coverage, even with the Navy.
no, no.
Nothing. I was going to ask you that. Okay.
Only thing I had covered was my medicine.
Okay.
It was Pergonal, Metrodin, Lupron, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
That was like the
Hmm.
follicle stimulating hormones, um, shots and that kind of stuff. That was covered, and that was probably $2,000 to $3,000 of med.
Mm,
But I mean, 10 to 15,000. The rest
yeah.
of it was very expensive.
Yeah. And just
Yeah.
reading your history with what the doctor you saw when you started IVF, they did something called GIFT,
Yeah.
gamete intrafallopian transfer. And the specialist you saw also did zygote, ZIFT treatments, zygote intrafallopian transfers. So you went through GIFT, is that right?
Well, that was my intention. I was planning to go through gift, and I don't know if I can explain the difference between gift and zift and IVF. I mean, gift basically was you take a catheter and you put the sperm, an air bubble, an egg, an air bubble, sperm, air bubble, egg, air bubble, and you insert that into the uterus and, you know, uh, I mean, into the fallopian tubes
Fallopian tube. Hmm.
fallopian tubes, and the sperm and egg meet and fertilize in the fallopian tubes, and then the embryo drifts down in a more natural way.
Hmm.
And that was what I was hoping I was going to be able to do. Um, Zift is they create the embryo in the lab like they do for IVF, but instead of loading it into a catheter and putting it into your uterus, they made a little incision in your navel and did it like a laparoscopy and put it into your tube. And
That's
the embryo went into the tube and drifted down naturally. That was considered a big pioneering way to do it in that uh, you know, really use the body to optimize how infertility, how embryos are, in real life without assisted reproductive technology.
hmm hmm
And I was going to do the egg air bubble, sperm air bubble gift,
Yep.
but
Yep.
we read about my
Yeah, I
crazy
did.
story there. I mean, it's like insanity just seems to follow people sometimes, I think. So, I was all like prepped in a gown on the bed, waiting for my surgery to
Yeah.
have laparoscopy and my husband's sperm and mixed it with my egg.
Yeah.
And my husband, God bless him, the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to my husband was that he missed the cup completely,
Oh my gosh, Sue.
waiting for, days to, store up the good guys and
Oh,
everything. So all the good guys
yeah,
landed
the good swimmers landed on
all
the
the
bathroom floor.
swimmers
It's
landed on the bathroom floor.
oh my
He had
gosh.
to come back and tell me that I can't believe this happened, but I missed the cup. I'm like, you had one thing to do, one thing to do, and you
Wow.
the cup and I was crying and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to have this today. I'm not going to
Oh.
do this today. I was like just a mess. They told my husband, can you go, can you do it again? And he's like, no, can't. And he said, not now.
Oh.
And well, what they did was they did retrieve my eggs. They had my husband take me home, put me to bed, and he went back and he made another donation. He didn't miss this time.
Hit
And
the target.
he hit the
Oh,
target.
so they couldn't use
And
frozen sperm then. They didn't do frozen sperm then?
he did do frozen sperm, but they wanted the fresh sperm. It was,
Okay.
you could lose a lot of them. But
Okay. I got
so
it. Okay. So they
so
did a combination. It sounds like I said combine IVF and ZIF procedures. And it said that you had 3 embryos transferred into your fallopian tubes and then 2 more into your uterus. Is that right?
right. So that particular cycle was my worst cycle ever, but it's the one that worked for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if our son is a Zift baby or an IVF baby, and he
Wow.
was not a gift baby because that's what we wanted to do, but we couldn't do it. So
Okay.
we had to wait a couple days later, and it's like detours. Obstacles, are thrown your way all the time on this
Yeah.
journey. And
Yeah.
you want what's best that it could possibly be. And I'm sure his guys weren't the best when he went back and did it again. But if it were, I don't know, I think about if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have the child I have.
I know.
Pretty darn amazing.
Wow. His name's Scott. And
Scott
I know he's
Robert is his middle name.
Scott
Yep.
Robert. He's attended some of your Resolve events. And I mean, what is
He,
his take on all of this? Like what you went through? Like, has he
you know
shared
what?
his thoughts?
He he's the one that said in my book, he was there signing when I had my book signing, he was there writing in people's back of the books. I am the living proof, about being a miracle baby. I am the living proof, Scott Johnston. He knows that it took me so long, took
Mm.
us so long. He never, ever, ever said anything. You hear about little ones that will say things like, I hate you, mommy. I don't love you, don't love me.
Yeah.
He never said any of that kind of stuff. He
Yeah.
knew how wanted and loved he was. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he I was going to show him the receipts of our medical treatment.
Well, I know you wanted to grow your family, and unfortunately, that didn't happen. And
I tried for 3 more years after Scott. Uh,
mhm.
I ended up having an ovarian cancer scare. I didn't write about that in my book.
Oh,
I ended up my mother died of ovarian cancer, and I
mm,
was concerned about my mother's cancer. And I had been on all these ovulating, stimulating meds, and I decided that it would be a good idea to do a CA 125. This was also around the time when Gilda Radner, from
mm,
Saturday Night Live,
yeah.
she she had a ovarian cancer scare, and she was proponing, like she was like telling people to get CA 125 as a cancer marker test to see
Mm,
if you have early ovarian cancer. I
mm.
did that, and mine was twice the normal
Oh,
level.
wow. Mm,
My doctor sent me to a specialist, an ovarian cancer specialist, and they said, they did exploratory, sonograms and whatnot. And he said, I don't think you have it. There could be some false positives. We're going to do another exam in about 6 months.
mm,
The same or has gone down. It might have been from endometriosis or diverticulitis or something like that. But if it's high, if it's gotten a lot higher, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
mm,
So I had it done again, the test of the CA 125 repeated, and it was triple the normal level. So with my mother having had ovarian, he said, I think the only thing we can do, Sue, is take your ovaries and fallopian tubes and do a
mm,
pathology on them. And I
mm.
was 40 years old, and that was it for me, so
Yeah.
42, maybe something like that. I can't remember.
Um,
In my early 40s when I had to have them removed. So
Sometimes our decisions are made for us, right?
Right, exactly. So,
Mm,
that was the end of it for me. I mean, I was, very happy to have had one child,
yeah.
but,
Yeah.
and I tried a couple more in vitros afterwards.
Mm,
But then when I had the ovarian cancer, I thought, well, I'm not going to go try third party or adoption. I'm my fighting and battle.
mm,
Those are very hard challenges too. Adoption
mhm.
isn't easy, third party isn't easy. None of it is easy, right?
No.
So I just, embraced being a mother of an only, not by choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
We have similar stories in the sense, yeah. I mean, so grateful for our ones. I see in your book how you said, I've waited my whole life for you. And I felt the
yeah.
same way with our daughter. And um, having some complications post birth, and they didn't know I had placenta accreta till during our C-section. And then 3 weeks after having our daughter, had to have an emergency hysterectomy. And it's just like, like at 40, I was 40 as well. So it's like, not being able to carry another child, but it's like I came to peace with that. We only had our one embryo. And so
Oh my
yours,
goodness.
yeah.
One embryo and it worked for you.
Yeah.
And what is your little one's name?
Olivia.
Olivia. And she is how old now?
She's 7.5.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great age. I used to teach elementary school. I taught elementary in the Philippines. I've taught for almost 20 years, and I love teaching other
Yeah.
people's children.
Oh, yeah.
But I felt like that was a way I could,
Mm,
fulfill my maternal instinct when I was
mm,
to have a child. Um, but I do feel like when the mother would come in with, number 4 or number 5, and I'm like, "Oh, what I wouldn't give to have one." It was
mm.
hard. It was a hard career for that reason.
I remember shared in your book how while you were going through fertility challenges, you were asked to support a friend at the birth of her baby.
Yes, yes. Our husbands were on the same ship and they were due to deploy for 6 months, and he was leaving. Like, he left like 2 weeks, 2, 3 weeks before she had her baby, and she needed a coach. And,
Yeah.
they naval officers or naval people, they don't get to come home and be there. You have to, deal without your
Mm,
husband being in town. So I
mhm.
was her coach and I went in and I watched her daughter be born, and I was helping her breathe and whatnot. I was really concerned about how was I going to feel seeing
Yeah.
another person. And I was probably 5 years into infertility by then.
Yeah. I mean, that's not easy. I think those listening may be like, how did you do that? It says, to the contrary, it was a miracle to behold the birth of her precious daughter. Moreover, the experience gave me the renewed courage I so desperately needed to never give up on my dream of becoming a mother. I will never abandon ship.
It's so
Yeah.
true. There's something just so miraculous about, newborn life. It's just so
Yeah.
incredible that what all has to come together to
Hmm.
be able to have this.
Yeah.
It's just so
Yeah.
amazing.
I
It
think that's so beautiful that you were able to be in that energy. A lot of women, I think, would have a hard time, and we've shared conversations about this where you have to say no to the baby shower, or sometimes there's triggers when you're at a store and you see the baby aisle, and here you are in, your 6 month break through fertility. You had hit unsuccessful inseminations, you're on a break, you're being called in to help someone else have their baby, and you were in a joyful kind of space, which I think that's something really to make note of for others to, you were in a celebration mode. Like, it's possible for me too. You kept that like energy and that spirit and that hope alive. Like, yeah, I'm here, and it's a joyful experience for me. It's
was a joyful experience. And I think it's a good example, Lisa, of how you can hold grief and joy
yes,
at the
yes,
time. It doesn't
yes,
one or the other. It doesn't have to always be grief all the time.
totally.
And, I think that I love your book for how you really are so gifted at
Mm,
telling people and helping people work through the wobbles. I call, the difficult times, I call them wobbles, the wobbles
mm.
in your journey. So
Thank you.
Yes, I think
Thank
that
you.
I should interview you about your book.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well,
Yes, yes.
we really understand this path, and I know there's so many gifts that you've learned from what you've gone through. And just to highlight, I mean, what you've done with Resolve, like you're the Federal Advocacy Day state captain for Michigan. You've done that for 6 years, I believe now,
I
maybe longer.
I have, uh-huh, yes.
Midwestern Regional Advocacy Day captain, coordinator of the last few years, co-founder of the Detroit Walk of Hope, the lead local and national Resolve support groups. You do them in person, virtually. You started Pages, which you said pregnancy and parenting after infertility support group in 2021. Then in 2022, you started the play group for Pages, like where the babies and their parents come together. I mean, look at you, Sue. Like all of this, it would not have happened if you hadn't gone through your own journey.
I know, I know. I do one-on-one coaching with people too, like if they
Mhm.
are brand new, I want to talk with them before they hop on one of the calls because my support groups are virtual and
Mhm.
it can feel really heavy to get on and see all these faces of people that you've never met before. And
Yeah.
at least if we have talked, I learn their story and I take notes so that I can introduce them and make them feel less, awkward because it's
Yeah.
hard. It's like
Yeah.
kudos to those who reach out for help. Uh,
Yeah.
so I love that. I had a really good call this morning with somebody. I've had four new people just this week call me about my support group.
That's
And
so great.
yeah, yeah. So I have a pretty thriving support group. I have 67 members right now that are
Wow.
in my infertility support group. And we do, I help people nationwide because during COVID, we could not meet in person. So I opened it up all over the United States. So I still am helping people all over the US. But
Mm.
the majority of them live in Michigan, not too far from me, Southeast Michigan. Um, and I also get together with them for infertility and friendship connections to deepen their connection with people who are on a similar journey. It makes you feel good to not
Yeah.
feel so alone. And
Yeah.
hugging in person and making new friends that aren't triggering to you, and they're not telling about their labor and pregnancy stories and that
Mm.
kind of thing. It's helpful. Uh,
Mm.
to get together and have fun. Uh,
Yeah.
and we've gone bowling, we've had picnics, we've had concerts, we've had Christmas gift exchange,
Mm.
having a fashion show next week.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
I call it Fashion for Fertility. And we will be, I have a wonderful representative for Cabby Clothing. Her name is Maureen Hennessy.
Hmm.
Has donated all of her commission that she works for selling clothes,
Yeah.
donates it to Resolve, the National Infertility Association.
Wow.
She has donated thousands and thousands of dollars from the sale of her clothes to Resolve.
Ah,
And she will be here on Friday the 14th.
ah.
And I have one of the gals in my book who's flying in from California to participate in the fashion show. And
Mm.
I'm going to be giving books away to my ladies who are going through general infertility right now. If they come, they
Mm.
get a free book
That's
as
wonderful.
wonderful dinner too.
Oh, yeah. In your book, because you highlight how many different stories are there in your book, Detours?
There
There's
are 11 altogether. I've
okay,
had
11
nine
different
other women,
stories.
myself, and my
Mhm.
husband wrote a story about the man's perspective as well.
Mm.
So
So important. Yeah.
the women on the front of my book are representing, like if you open it up, there's 10 of us, and we
Oh, that's so great.
still are really close. We had our 35th anniversary get together in October this of 2024. And yeah, I mean, we are very,
Wow.
very close. We met during our journey to have our babies, and now, some of the women are their children are mothers now.
Wow.
Have that many that are moms yet. I think that, most of them are still, dating. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah, they're wonderful, wonderful people. And we have a story for just about every kind of journey. We have donor egg, donor sperm, adoption, childless not by choice,
Mm-hmm.
living a resolution. We have PCOS. We have a stillborn. You know,
Mm-hmm.
grievous story. I was unexplained infertility.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
name it. We've had
Yeah.
surrogacy. Yeah, there's just about, we've had multiples. You know, the gal who's
Yeah.
coming had girls born 13 days after, triplet girls, 13
Mm.
days after Scott was
Oh,
born.
wow. Oh my gosh. You've got quite the community there.
Every story is really like, wow, pretty,
Yeah.
pretty amazing stories, I think, each and every.
Yeah. Well, it's such an honor to know you. And just here we are in our orange. If for those who want to watch us live, and I'll share this on YouTube and we'll share highlights of our talk. But we're representing the
Yes,
color
we
orange, which
are. Orange is my favorite color. I'm wearing my Believe necklace because I do believe that you will find brighter days ahead somehow, some way. I feel that you will get to the other side. We don't necessarily know what that is going to look like, um, but you will have happier times and learn how to adjust and make the most of your life, no matter
Mm,
what. Um, I believe in that sincerely.
so good, Sue. You're such a light. I'm so grateful that we're connected. And for those who want to meet you, connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Well, I think my email is the infertility advocate. You can, send me an email. You can look on my website. It's also the infertility advocate. You can call me.
Yeah. We won't post the number, but no, look on the Resolve website too. You're the Michigan
Oh,
lead for the
website.
groups.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Resolve.org. And yeah, representing for National Fertility. I like to say Fertility Awareness Week versus Infertility Awareness Week, but
Right. I agree. I
in
agree.
our orange, and we're here to really be bright lights in this kind of dark space and let people know they're not alone. There's so much support and community, and those who've walked this path are we're here to guide and help any way we can.
In addition to National Infertility Awareness Week, Federal Advocacy Day is coming up in May, and that is a great opportunity. It is a virtual. I used to go to Washington, D.C. in person and walk through the halls of Senate and, whatnot. And it was pretty amazing. But now it's all done from the comfort of your own home. And you will get to talk with your senators and representatives, tell your story,
Yeah.
and advocate for those so that we can find affordable access to care. And we need it now, like I said,
Yeah.
more than ever.
Yeah. We need all of our voices. May 20th, right? 2025, May 20th.
Already registered. I am not leading this year. I have not led for a couple years. I went
Mm,
on to do more Resolve Advocacy Day training on a nation level instead of a state
mm,
level. But then
mhm,
I decided it was time to pass the baton on
mm.
to younger people, and we have
Yeah,
grown immensely in Michigan.
that's awesome. Yeah, you're doing such good work.
Mm.
So thank you. Thank you. We'll be in touch. And just, I know so many people are like absorbing up what you're saying and just like, wow, what a journey, like where IVF started, where it is today. I mean, we still have so far to go, but stories
Oh,
like yours, like I love sharing. So
thank you so much. The book you can get on Amazon.
yes.
You just can go to my website,
Hmm.
fertilityadvocate.com, and there's a little link at the top that says purchase detours here. And that
Yeah.
and it takes about a day or two to get the book. It's really fast. So they're
So
pre-funded.
good.
So
Awesome. Well, I'll link everything in the show notes. So
okay.
check her out. Sue, you're amazing.
Thank
We'll
you
talk
so
soon.
much, Lisa. I can't wait till you come and talk to my group.
Yay. Yes, we're doing that in just like a month, right? April. I'll be a
Yes,
guest
it
in your
is.
support group. Thank you for having me and thank you for this conversation. You're
What an
amazing.
opportunity. Thank you. You're a light as well, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.